Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Chet Chats. Today, I will be answering a question from a very esteemed colleague of mine, Chelsea Layden. Chelsea asked a really good question, something that's shared on the radio, and just thought it'd be a good topic for a little brief discussion. And that question is whether or not a person is entitled to make a citizen's arrest when they when they've seen an Amber Alert and they see the vehicle that matches the description in the Amber Alert, and the occupants of the vehicle also seem to match the physical description of that indicated in the Amber Alert. It's a great question. Thank you so much for that. Once again, I always appreciate questions, so don't hesitate. I at least know that when I make the video, at least one person cares about it, so oftentimes that's one more than what I normally get. But anyway, so yeah, let's dive right in. So this definitely is a very state-specific issue. It's not governed by federal law, so unfortunately you're going to have to know your state statute regarding this. But we'll just take Florida, for example. It's a place where Chelsea and I had practiced together. And also, Florida is the kind of place where something like this would happen, right? I mean, Florida's in the news all the time. Florida man this, Florida man that. I can see that if something were to happen in terms of a person making a citizen's arrest after an Amber Alert, it would definitely happen somewhere like Florida or California maybe. But anyway, so Florida's citizen's arrest statute is pretty straightforward, and it's very similar to what appears most states' statutes are regarding citizen's arrest, and that is that a person is entitled to make a citizen's arrest, so a non-law enforcement officer, when they witness a felony or breach of the peace. Breach of the peace is a very vague phrase or legal term, so we're just going to focus on felony because that's really where this applies. But if you witness a felony, or if you have reasonable basis to believe that a felony has occurred, so it can't just be a suspicion or a hunch. It needs to be let's just call it probable cause, just to be safe. You have good probable cause to believe that someone has committed or is in the process of committing a felony. You can detain them for a short period of time and immediately call the police. So you can't lock them in your basement for 2 weeks. You can't, it's even recommended not to even put them in handcuffs, but really just to call the police right away so they can be formally charged if that's appropriate. So basically, yeah, I mean, if you know, or if you have a reasonable basis to believe that a felony occurred and, false imprisonment, child abduction, that sort of thing, would definitely fall, at least under Florida law, under at least one felony. So that doesn't seem to be the issue. Here's where the issue is. It's whether or not the existence of an Amber Alert would give reasonable cause to a reasonable person to believe that a felony occurred. And it might seem on the surface, I thought, well, obviously, yeah, I mean, an Amber Alert, that person's obviously committing a felony. But then we have to discuss what is an Amber Alert, right? An Amber Alert is issued by whatever state agency actually investigates a child abduction, and there's a set of criteria that they use. And the Department of Justice has issued 4 criteria for when to issue an Amber Alert, and number 2 on that list is that the child is in imminent fear or has an imminent threat of death or serious bodily injury. However, many states have not used that criteria, that number 2 factor in issuing an Amber Alert. So what you don't want to do is be in a situation where you see an Amber Alert, you go and you pull a gun on someone, you stop them, you do a citizen's arrest, and it turns out no felony occurred. And then you say, okay, well, I was relying on the Amber Alert. And then you find out that the agency that issued the Amber Alert was not representing, by virtue of the Amber Alert, that a felony occurred or that the child, was even abducted or was in fear of death or serious bodily injury. You need to know in your jurisdiction whether or not an Amber Alert necessarily implies that a felony occurred. It's certainly possible that a state could issue Amber Alerts simply when a child goes missing. There are many times where an Amber Alert is issued from a parental abduction, and so you could be in a situation where now you're effectuating a citizen's arrest on a parent that has a child, and now the abduction is, happened vis-a-vis a custody dispute, a custody battle. These two parents don't agree on whose day it is, and then you're over there, pulling a gun on someone, and this parent has no, and this parent thinks someone's trying to abduct their child, and they pull a gun back on you. So it can get really sticky. Like I said, you need to know in your jurisdiction what an Amber Alert implies. What facts, if there's an Amber Alert, what facts does that mean that you're justified in relying on? Because otherwise, you don't know. I think best practices, obviously, is if you see an Amber Alert, if you hear an Amber Alert and you see a vehicle matching the description, follow the vehicle. Immediately call law enforcement. Continue to follow the vehicle, maybe make video if possible. I think where the situation would get to the point where action needs taken is if the vehicle stops, the people start to get out of the vehicle, and you risk losing the child. The child is, they're getting on a bus, or they're going to an airport or something like that. Then you have to make a hard decision of, hey, I got a call to make. I have to, stop this, or else this child could go missing forever. And that's just going to be something that, you're going to have to make in the moment. I would recommend, make video, maybe stop and, get out and say, hey, excuse me, if they immediately run, if you approach them in a very reasonable, normal way that a person approaches another person, and then they take flight, then I think the fact of their flight could go to establish guilty conscience, in addition to the matching vehicle description, the matching physical description of the people. And now you have the fact that, when someone comes up and approaches them very amicably, that they run, I think that could very easily establish reasonable cause to believe a felony occurred. So anyway, try not to make this video too long, but so that's really what the issue comes down to, is knowing what agency issues Amber Alerts in your jurisdiction, and knowing what facts they require to be established, at least to some level of proof, before issuance of the Amber Alert. Thanks again, Chelsea, for the question.